back to Ty Walks the Talk. Today's topic, George Stinney Jr., the tragic execution of a child. Let's talk about it. But before we get started, let's go over the tools we're going to use during this workout. We're going to be using our trusted backpack, along with a 20-pound weight to put in our backpack. We're taking our treadmills right on up to a 3.2. Well, I am already there, and I hope you are as well. My name is Ty, also known as Tyra, and I'm glad you decided to walk with me today, or at the very least, sit and watch me talk. Either way, I appreciate it. Well, without further ado, hi Gemini.
Hi Tyra, it's nice to chat with you again. How can I help you today?
Well, I was looking to talk about George Stinney Jr.
Case of George Stinney Jr. is a tragic and unjust chapter in American history. In 1944, at the age of 14, he became the youngest person executed in the 20th century. Convicted of murdering 2 white girls, his trial lasted a mere 3 hours, and there was very little evidence against him. Would you like to know more about the circumstances surrounding the murders, the trial, or the aftermath of his execution?
Well, the circumstances
surrounding George Stinney Jr.'s arrest and conviction are deeply troubling. 2 young white girls, Betty June Binnicker and Mary Emma Thames, were found murdered in South Carolina in 1944. Stinney, a 14-year-old black boy, was accused of the crime. Despite a lack of physical evidence, Stinney was arrested, interrogated without an attorney present, and quickly tried and convicted by an all-white jury. He was sentenced to death and executed in the electric chair just 83 days after the girls' bodies were discovered. Would you like to know more about the trial itself or the aftermath of the case?
Yeah, what type of evidence did they have?
Evidence against George Stinney was incredibly weak. The prosecution's case rested almost entirely on his alleged confession, which was obtained under questionable circumstances, given his age and lack of legal representation. There was no physical evidence linking him to the crime scene, and the murder weapon was never found. The trial itself was a sham. It lasted less than 3 hours, and the all-white jury took only 10 minutes to reach a guilty verdict. The speed and lack of due process raised serious concerns about the fairness of the proceedings.
But how was he accused?
George Stinney was accused of murdering Betty June Binnicker and Mary Emma Thames, 2 young white girls. The accusation was based solely on an alleged confession, which many believe was coerced due to his age, and the circumstances surrounding the interrogation. There was no physical evidence linking him to the crime scene, and the trial itself was a sham, lasting only a few hours. Would you like to know more about the conditions of his interrogation or the aftermath of his execution?
The conditions of his interrogation.
The truth is, there was almost none. His conviction in 1944 was based on a forced confession and an all-white jury's decision in a trial that lasted less than 3 hours. Here's what we know. What evidence was used against him? 1. A forced confession. Police claimed Stinney confessed to killing 2 white girls, Betty June Binnicker, 11, and Mary Emma Thames, 7. No written or recorded confession exists, and no lawyer or family member was present when he allegedly confessed. 2. No physical evidence. There were no fingerprints, bloodstains, or weapons linking Stinney to the crime. The girls were killed with a heavy railroad spike or similar blunt object, but nothing connected him to it. 3. Flawed testimony. Witnesses who saw Stinney that day said he was with his sister during the time of the murders, but this was ignored. His size also made the murder unlikely. Stinney was only 5'1" and weighed about 90 pounds. It would have been extremely difficult for him to move 2 bodies alone. What evidence led to his exoneration in 2014? 1. No signed confession. The state had no real proof that Stinney confessed voluntarily. His family and supporters argued that the confession was coerced through threats and intimidation. 2. New witnesses and testimonies. Stinney's sister testified in 2014 that he was with her at the time of the murders. Other community members came forward to say the police investigation was rushed and biased. 3. No due process. Stinney had no real legal defense. His court-appointed lawyer never appealed the conviction. The trial had no black jurors, and the verdict was decided in less than 10 minutes. Final ruling, 2014. After reviewing the lack of evidence and unfair trial, a judge vacated his conviction, meaning it was erased from legal records. The judge ruled that Stinney was denied due process, but did not officially declare him innocent since the real killer was never found. His case is now seen as one of the worst miscarriages of justice in U.S. history.
What took so long for his case to be vacated?
George Stinney Jr.'s conviction wasn't vacated until 2014, 70 years after his execution, for several reasons. 1. Racism and Jim Crow laws. In 1944, South Carolina, Black people had little to no legal protection. The justice system was built to protect white interests, and wrongful convictions of Black defendants were common. Stinney's case was largely ignored because it was seen as justice served in the racist legal system of the time. Lack of legal representation and appeals. Stinney's court-appointed lawyer made no real effort to defend him. There was no appeal filed, which meant the case never moved beyond the original trial. His family was too poor and powerless to challenge the verdict, and no civil rights organizations took up his case at the time. Fear and intimidation. Stinney's family was forced to flee town after his conviction due to threats from white mobs. With no family members left to push for an appeal, the case was forgotten for decades. No interest in revisiting the case. For years, South Carolina had no reason to revisit the case. The state had no incentive to admit wrongdoing. Unlike some high-profile wrongful convictions, Stinney's case lacked surviving evidence and records that could be easily reviewed. Renewed interest in the early 2000s. In the 2000s, Stinney's case gained attention from activists and historians who pushed for a new trial. His surviving family members, especially his sister, Im Ruffner, began speaking out and demanding justice. In 2013, attorneys filed a motion to reopen the case, citing the lack of due process and the coerced confession.
George Stinney Jr. was just 14 years old when the justice system failed him, convicted without evidence, denied a real defense, and executed in a world where his life was seen as disposable. It took 70 years for the courts to admit what his family already knew. He never got a fair trial, but justice delayed is justice denied. His story is not just about the past, it's a reminder that racial injustice in the legal system is not history, it's reality. I know we unpacked quite a bit during this walk, but this workout is complete.
I don't know about you, but I feel like I can do a little bit more.